As leaders, we are communicating information all day long. And I find that most leaders often struggle with balancing authority and approachability, which, if they lean too heavily toward communicating with authority, they can unintentionally stifle open communication. And that will then lead to disengaged teams, diminished morale, and other things. Well, Linnita Hosten helps our leaders overcome these blocks by helping them focus on authenticity, self awareness, and the power of their voices to foster connection and collaboration, which ultimately will drive more productivity, trust, innovation, and the bottom line. Linnita, welcome to How I Turned the Corner.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to dive into all things leadership.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background. Just how did you get into this place of having such authority on this topic?
Yeah, it's so funny when someone calls it authority, you're thinking to yourself, "Wow, I just kind of worked my way through having hard conversations and overcoming obstacles, and you end up in this place." But when I graduated college, I wanted to be a journalist. And I got discouraged because my speech at the time did not mirror those that I saw on TV. And I decided to do something in the realm of communication. It landed me at a job where I was doing outreach, and I was essentially doing workshops and keynotes in front of all kinds of persons, all kinds of stakeholders, dignitaries, you name it. And you know, that's kind of what catapulted my desire to work within organizations and with leaders. So I was being placed in front of leaders, giving content specifically around how students in the sixth grade, how if we expose them to things regarding to college and post high school options, they'd be more likely to graduate or to go to and finish college. And, I had to do a lot of convincing to stakeholders at the state level, educational leaders. And, that kind of exposed me to a lot of rooms. And I was pretty young. I was 24 at the time when that happened. And so when people ask, how did you get involved in this? I kind of fell into it. And I don't know if you've experienced this before, but you start doing one thing and it exposes other areas of your capability, capacity, and sometimes your passion. And, what I got out of that was I was very fascinated with seeing other leaders kinda develop their voice as I was developing mine pretty young. So that's kind of like how I got, k to this place a little bit.
Okay, that's awesome. Amazing. Yeah, I often we work with job seekers. We help individuals who are on a job hunt. It's just like one of the things we do at my company. And I find that especially younger job seekers, people who are just new into the workforce, they don't know what they're great at yet. And it's so important that I think we as leaders create those little different opportunities for like what you had to sort of learn and discover. Because I didn't find my passion until I was in my 30s. And so,
Mm.
it was nice to just have a lot of different things that I could do at the beginning of my career to sort of figure out like what I was actually naturally wired for. So that's awesome that you had that opportunity. So now you're this kind of leading authority though on having people helping people find their voice. Can you talk a little bit about what you do and how you do it with with leaders?
For sure. So I own a training and development consultancy. That's very fancy for saying we teach leaders how to be better communicators so that they can effectively lead their teams. And it's not what you think because sometimes people assume, "Oh, you teach public speaking." That's a branch of what we do, but there's a humanity aspect that I feel like is required for leadership. And it's beyond just the words that you say. It's everything that your body is conveying and teaching leaders to have ownership of how they're actually showing up. And, it's a holistic approach because your your mood is affected by your lack of sleep. Your diet affects your tone of the pace for the day and your relationships, external of your workplace, whether that's your marriage, your children, your friendships, those social environments impact how you feel too. And you show up to work with all of those elements impacting how you communicate. And it's amplified when there's pressure, when there's conflict. And so we get the fun task of helping people pull back the layers and getting real with, holistically, who am I and how are my external, I would say, environments impacting how I show up each day. And so we would say that's a pretty fun job.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's really great. So we were I'm really curious to kind of talk to you a little bit about power and how leaders use or don't use their
Mm.
power in communication. Can you kind of help expand on that with me? Like, what is your definition? What do you see leaders? Maybe let's start with like using power in a negative way. Well, how do you see
Mm.
leaders do that?
Well, first, I want to define that there are two types of power that, as leaders, we have. You have earned authority or influence. And that is when a person is intentional about building relationship and rapport. They have really good interpersonal skills, meaning how they communicate with one person, them and another individual. Really good listening skills. You can pick up on emotional cues and body cues by body language, even in a virtual environment. When you have those elements, you build earn influence, which is a source of power. When you have earned influence, there's an established relationship and built trust. So that makes conflict very easy to work through. It makes having hard conversations um, very, I wouldn't say easy, but you feel more comfortable doing it with that person. And that's the goal that we really want. Now, there's another kind of power, which is when you have established influence. And that is when, based on your title alone or your hierarchy in an organization, it is assumed that you are a person I should respect. And sometimes when we're in those roles where it's assumed, if you're not if you're not the kind of person who desires human connection and empathy is not a natural thing, uh connection is not a natural desire of yours, it's really easy to use your what we call established influence um to build your rapport. And in those instances, you know they're not sustainable. When you have, I would say, established influence, people sometimes can walk on eggshells talking with you. There's not an established identity that they have in the relationship that you are seeking to build. So when we talk about power, I always ask people, how are you earning the influence that you have, even if it's already established? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I think too there's another element of that which is also not as sort of unrecognized power.
Mm.
Where people maybe have that assumed power and responsibility and they're maybe shying away from it or they're resisting it because they want to be one of the team or they want to part of just still in the trenches and they don't recognize that they have this power and it can create a I think a really interesting
Mm.
dichotomy in organizations because then like you said another byproduct is people kind of walking on eggshells but in a slightly different way, not out of fear.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But
And in the reverse, in the inverse, I would say. Yeah. When I think of that, I think shrinking. I think imposter syndrome. I think of individuals whom are lacking security of self. They have this established title, but in the back of their minds, they're saying, how the heck did I get here? I'm not even sure I'm competent to be in this role. And I've been in those shoes too, where you are leading a group of people who are sometimes way more experienced than you. They're way more knowledgeable about the thing that you're leading them to. Sometimes they were much older than me as well. And you have to really lean on your sense of like who you really are. And there are sometimes you're in a role not because of what you know, but who you are, the core of your character, your reliability, your willingness to take initiative, not necessarily the things that you can learn, but you're there for who you are. And in those instances, I would really empower people to lean into that. If you were, assigned this role and they're big shoes to fill, well, your feet are capable of filling them and owning that.
yeah, yeah, and I think that comes to a leader that has maybe not been given that training and mentoring and coaching. So it's definitely something that can be taught, I believe, to leaders that are, of course, open to it.
Yeah.
Has that been your experience?
Well, I mean, I think it depends. When I work, I didn't mention this, but I am a holistic coach. And holistic just means mental, social, emotional, physical. And we apply that to communication skills. So when I get to pull back the layers of those in leadership, asking them questions like, who are you? Why does this matter? What are your core values? Depending on how they migrated to where they are in the organization, they may have never processed those questions. That was never a thing to them to define. What was more important was where they were going and how much money they were making. And over time, that identity, it has no legs to stand on. And so sometimes I have found, not often, but sometimes building that identity. Who are you? Why does this matter? What are those core values that align with what you're doing? Why does this light your insides on fire? What fulfills you? Those are questions that we sometimes have to rewind and ask ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I, witnessed an organization that had this sort of unrecognized power where the leader would say things like,
Mm.
"Well, you make the decision. I empower you," and he'd say this to his team, "I empower you to make the decision." And it left the team, also feeling a little bit like, they weren't sure what to decide. They didn't have really the agency to sort of make those decisions. And so, I think that it's really good to, kinda help that leader unpack the power so they understand too the dynamic of, what happens when you don't realize your power, because it can, have another negative consequence. I mean, like that example I just said with the company I
Yeah.
observed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's then talk about then authority and when it's used really well. Like when you see a leader who've maybe somebody you've worked with and you've helped them turn the corner, what have you seen them what have you seen them do that? And what's different?
Yeah. Well, I want to start with a leader that I actually experienced. And this was actually at my first job. My first employer was Starbucks. And by the way, I make the best caramel macchiatos. And they're not equal wherever you go, by the way. But my first manager, her name was Amanda, and she was exceptional at galvanizing. Exceptional. Now, I didn't recognize this at 16, but when I started studying organizational development and leadership skills, what I experienced through her, I often found myself mimicking, not realizing that until I started doing this work. Like, wow, these are things I learned under Amanda's leadership. Well, let me just give you an example of how fascinating Amanda was. So, Starbucks has a culture of repeat buyers, and I don't call them addicts, I call them repeat buyers. But these are individuals who they keep coming back for a service, and she would tell us, if they're coming back, it's our responsibility to get to know them. We should know their names and the names of their children if they bring them repeatedly. She had us study them. So it got to the point where we were naming every customer who comes in repeatedly by name. Mr. John, hey, you coming, you getting your white mocha today? And before you knew it, it was expected that the lines were outside of the door and the tip jars were overflowing. Cash. People were putting $50 bills in there. We had created such an atmosphere where people felt like home. They felt like they knew us. And the crazy thing, no one believes this, but some of those repeat customers came to my high school graduation cookout. That's
Mm.
how much of a family it felt like they were. But in hindsight, what Amanda was teaching us was the value of building customer relationships and creating like a sense of community in your establishment. And when I break that down, sometimes when I'm training, I mention to people how quickly do you learn the names of people who are not even on your team, so that when you see them in the hall or you see them pop online, you know them, because that's a very easy way to gain intimacy when you learn a person's name. So you learn a name, you're greeting them with eye contact. Eye contact. You're talking about some people don't even get this in their own homes. So these are very micro ways to build community. I learned that through Amanda's leadership skills. The other thing that I loved about Amanda, what she did to foster a very positive environment, which I would attribute to her leadership skills, is she was a coach. She wasn't a supervisor. She would watch you. She would sit on the floor and say, "Hey, today we're going to practice making." She'd pick 4 drinks and put out a timer. Now, that didn't increase my pay or that didn't give me any props, but she was refining the skills so I could grow my confidence. And she would always ask me, "What's your goal? Are you interested in management?" She was coaching me at 16. And so I watched her. There were other people that I worked with who were much older than I, and I watched her coach them. There were several people on our team who went on to be store managers, and they were in their early 20s. Now, that's a retail model, right? And when I work with organizations, typically these are organizations that require college degrees, advanced degrees in most cases. And so that's a small example, but it's big in the area of community, relationship building, collaboration. And I think it has some space in a corporate environment as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think leaders often overlook what they're really running is not a business, but a community.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. Yes.
And that's how I mean, I years ago, I had a, terrible situation happen to me, and, um, I lost my brother to a heroin overdose, and,
Mhm.
I had my about 5 years into running my company, and, I had to leave. I didn't have it in me I mean, I had to go grieve, and, I had been modeling unintentionally or not unintentionally, deliberately, but I had been modeling a family first, take care of yourself, take care of your life, leadership style. And what happened for me was when I had to go, my team modeled it back to me. "We're gonna take care of
Wow.
you. You taking care of us, we're gonna take care of you." And Lenita, it completely changed me as a leader. When I finally came back, which was 6 months later, where I was fully engaged again,
Oh.
I just it changed the way I led. Like, I suddenly saw myself more as a member of this team, not someone who just needed to, like, command and control and do it this way. Like,
Mm,
I saw that my role maybe was a little bit different. Obviously, I had this, title, but
mm,
I was a part of a community and a micro community. And it really it was r it changed, like, the way you fire, it changes the way you pick your vendors, changes the way you think about, the customers you want. Like,
yeah.
yeah, it's pretty cool when you change that mindset.
So beautiful that you got to experience that. You lived it and then it was reciprocated. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was pretty phenomenal. Yeah, and I mean, and that was in 2016, so that was a long time ago. I still feel that. I still continue to experience that. Like,
Yeah.
I tell leaders that I'm working with that I'm an entrepreneur too. I wake up in a cold sweat just like they do at 3 a.m., but I'm different in that I go back to sleep because I know I have the team I need to help me
Mm,
weather the storm. And so that's what I want for leaders is to have that. And I think it comes to this communication and communicating with the balance of authority and the balance, like what we said at the beginning. And so, can you cite some more examples like what you had with Amanda?
yes. I want to share, one with my team member. A few weeks ago, one of them came to me and said, I need to talk to you about something. And I'm thinking it's about a project. So I'm like, sure. And it was very personal. I mean, we just jumped right into it. And, we talked through what she was sharing, and then I asked her at the end, I said, "How do you feel now that you got that off your chest?" She was like, "I feel great, but I wasn't nervous bringing it to you because you're so easy to talk to." And I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, I talk about you all the time to my other friends. Like, how did I get so lucky?" And, I said, "Well, it's so interesting that you would say that because I never want anyone to not enjoy the work that they do. And part of that is, having compassion with the people that I lead. And I remember when I onboarded her, I spent the first day just learning about her. We didn't do anything work related. And she she was so amazed because she was like, "Well, are we gonna get it to any work today?" I'm like, "No. I just want to get to know you and you know me. I want it to be that simple." and she said that that's never happened to her before. And I wanna emphasize, I'm not doing this as a form of manipulation. I genuinely desire to have understanding, to know, like, what do you do outside of work? What are your goals even beyond this role? I don't assume you're gonna be here forever. How can I help you connect to that? And I'm likely that way because that's the kind of leadership I received. Almost every place, someone voluntarily, like, picked me up and said, "Hey, let me help you get to where you're going." So I never had to ask or advocate for mentorship. I know how to, but it was always just given to me. So I kind of model that too in my own organization. You want people to feel like, it's a win-win when I come and work here. I get building, the organization is building, but I'm growing too.
Mm. I love that as an onboarding process. That's really interesting. Matter of fact, just came from a speaking engagement last week where we talked about onboarding as one of the most important components of hiring, often forgotten. I'm going to add that to my list of that day one. To just get to know the employee because also because of all the compliance and the lawsuits and all that stuff, a lot of leaders are really hesitant to get to know their employees, especially because, like in an interview setting, you really can't ask a
Yes.
lot of those true getting to know you questions, right? You have to keep it focused on the skill and what the job requirements are just legally. But you don't have to do that anymore once they're an employee. I mean, you still have to be, of course, decent and kind
Yes.
that. But you can
Yes.
definitely get to know your employees. So I love that you did that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna add that to my list.
Please do.
Yeah. Well, good. So tell us different ways that we can get in touch with you. Like what are ways that we can find you?
Absolutely. Well, I have a free community if you're interested in growing your communication skills, whether that's public speaking, listening, and you can do so at growmyspeakingskills.com. It's free to join. And we meet weekly, and I call it a practice seat. So if you have an upcoming presentation, you have an upcoming hard conversation, or an opportunity to advocate or pitch yourself, and you want to practice that, you just come on, and you'll get live feedback from myself or someone on my team. And that's growmyspeakingskills.com. And if that does not interest you, you can join my YouTube channel where we have content release twice a week, all things communication that you can think of. We're going to run a series on interviewing next month. So that's an option too. And I'm on every platform as Linnita Hosten. I'm most active though on LinkedIn and YouTube. But if you just want to know me casually, feel free to check out Facebook.
Excellent. Okay. Well, that is great. It's been so lovely to chat with you. I could definitely keep doing this for a lot longer, especially with how much we have in common. So,
Yes, I so enjoyed this. So thank you for inviting me.
yeah, you bet. Lanita, thanks so much for joining How I Turned the Corner. We'll see you soon, okay? We'll check in with you soon.
I love that.